Bum. Hey everybody, it's time to get in here with your coffees and your beverages and your teas and your orange juices and anything else that would be a delicious simultaneous sip. Everybody, let's drink to Sunday. Simultaneous sip. First of all, a couple of things. I'm not wearing my glasses this morning, you may have noticed, because I can't find my glasses. Now, I'm one of those people who always leaves them in the same place. And indeed, last night before bed, I put them in their normal place, and I said to myself, I wonder if I should maybe look at something before I go to bed. And I decided not to. So I left my glasses there, and this morning they're not there. Yeah, I've got either the cat or the dog working in conjunction have my glasses somewhere. So somewhere in my house, it looks like the cat probably knocked it off the counter and the dog went to chew on them somewhere. So somewhere in the house are my glasses. Anyway, let's look at some of President Trump's tweets. He's got some good ones. So we got a little some nicknaming going. So this one was 3 hours ago, and it says, "Finally, little with a apostrophe, little Adam Schiff, the leaking monster of no control." So Adam Schiff is now a little leaking Adam Schiff, the leaking monster of no control. And he even put leaking with an apostrophe. Is now blaming the Obama administration for Russian meddling in the 2016 election. He is finally right about something. He's finally right about something. Obama was president and did nothing. Thank you, Adam. So that was funny. So I have to read that again. Finally, little Adam Schiff, the leaking monster of no control. The leaking monster of no control. Everything he says is instantly quotable. I don't know how he does that. All right, then here's my favorite one of the morning. See if this sounds familiar to you. This is the president's tweet from 3 hours ago. He said, "I never said Russia did not meddle in the election. I said it, quote, it may be Russia or China or another country or group, or it may be a 400-pound genius sitting in bed and playing with his computer," unquote. The Russian hoax was that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia. It never did. So the president is saying, the first reaction I had, which is the news covering like some event that didn't happen? So the news was treating the president's hoax claim as though what he really meant, and he didn't, was that Russia was, trying to meddle with the election. He wasn't talking about that. He was talking about his own allegations about collusion. And it's really just jaw-dropping that the news, with complete straight faces, John Brennan and other people on the news saying, "Oh, well, it looks like we've disproved the president's hoax claim," when in fact they had just confirmed it. Well, confirmed is too strong a word. We don't know that there are no further charges coming, but the fact that none have happened yet, and the fact that Rosenstein was so specific about saying that there were no allegations of collusion, at least with the troll farm, the possibility of anything affecting the president at this point is just shrinking and shrinking. All right, but he's got more. He's not done yet. Here's one of my favorites, all right? This is the president again this morning, 2 hours ago. He said, "If it was the goal of Russia to create discord, disruption, and chaos within the U.S., then with all the committee hearings, investigations, and party hatred, they have succeeded beyond their wildest dreams." And here's the money shot. This is his last sentence. They are laughing their asses off in Moscow. Get smart, America. All right. I want you just to absorb this for a moment. He's the president of the United States, and completely in character, he tweets to the world, they're laughing their asses off in Moscow. Now, I may have told you a number of times that mocking is really strong persuasion. So if you mock somebody for their opinion, they'll often back off it. I'll tell you something that I can't be sure there's a cause and effect here, but I think there is. Back in the early 90s, those of you who are old enough to remember, the business book market was very large. So there were just tons of business books. Everybody was buying business books about how to make their company successful. And most of them were just total BS. And that was about the time that Dilbert became a cartoon. Now, when Dilbert became big and started mocking all of the things that happened in the business world, the business book market went from going off to crashing. So the business book market just disappeared when Dilbert ran in the newspaper every day, just viciously mocking, business trendy things that are in books. And I always wondered how much of that was causal. Is it a coincidence that, the biggest business cartoon of all time was mocking this form of book at the same time that form of book stopped being a viable market? I don't think it's a coincidence. And I heard from a lot of people who said, in their companies, we were going to implement a program, but we saw a Dilbert comic making fun of the thing we were going to do, and we decided not to do it. I got lots of email that sounded just like that, where they'd said, we were going to do something, you've already mocked us for it, in your comic, you mocked people who do this, so we decided not to do it. So my point is that laughing at somebody is super serious persuasion. And you see it on Twitter all the time when people come after me. When they send people after me, the bots, they always come mocking. And the mocking always takes the same form. It's like, well, it takes this form. It takes this form, which Dale, my counter, my alter ego, will explain. Well, are you the creator of Garfield? Garfield is funny. Why don't you go back to doing Garfield? And so mocking is very powerful. So when the president says that Moscow is laughing their asses off in Moscow, what he's really saying to the Democrats is that you have become a laughing stock. Now, if you think that's a throwaway line, you are so wrong. Because he also, the very next, or the one before this, tweet, the one after that, was he tweeted a cartoon by Branko. And it's got CNN in the year 2038, and there's a very old Wolf Blitzer saying, update, we should see evidence of Russia-Trump collusion any day now. Now, so in two different tweets, one after another, he has treated the Russia collusion part, just the collusion part, as a topic of mocking. And so he mocked it by tweeting a comic that mocked it, and then he said that Russia is laughing their asses off at basically the Democrats and the country. So this is solid persuasion, because the Democrats are in a position, they're not quite there, but they are in a position where the Russia collusion, well, let me test this with you. We're very soon, and maybe we're already there, I think the president's sort of calling the transition point, but we went from a place where Russia collusion was a serious sounding topic. You see where I'm going with this, right? It wasn't long ago that Russia collusion was dead serious. It was so serious, it was like, worrying about if the country was actually, under attack, would it rip the republic apart? Did we have a sitting president who was somehow working with Russians? So it wasn't long ago that Russia collusion was a deadly serious topic. Now Russia collusion is starting, and the president is now signaling the transition from serious topic to topic of mocking. Right? He called the turn with his 2 tweets. So that if you said, put your mind in the future, all right? Put your mind 2 years in the future. Do you think that the phrase Russia collusion 2 years from now will be a punchline or a description of a serious thing that happened in history? You already know the answer, don't you? It's already transitioning. We're on the cusp. Russia collusion, with I think Rosenstein's announcement, has now turned from serious historical threat, problem, issue to literally a topic of ridicule. It's a punchline now. And the president's giving it a little nudge, all right? Basically, the president has informed the world that Russia collusion is a punchline going forward. Now, remember I told you, I'm not sure when I first said this, maybe a month ago, maybe longer. Fact check me on this. When was the first time I told you that time has reversed and now time is on the president's side? Because at this point, now that Russia collusion has turned into a punchline, the longer it goes, the longer that punchline sits over Adam Schiff. The longer Adam Schiff doesn't release their Democratic memo, the longer that becomes a punchline. So Democratic memo is starting to sound like Geraldo's safe. Which of these things, doesn't the whole Russia collusion thing sound like, Geraldo's safe? And so does the Democratic memo. It's all Geraldo's safe. It's just something the media talks about, and it will someday be a punchline. And I guess that someday was today, Sunday. All right. Is anything else happening in the news? Let's see. So I'm sure that CNN's trying to ignore the news today because it's not working in their favor. Let's see what's happening. Some stuff about the Olympics I don't care about. Trump's... So Fox News is talking about his Twitter storm, same as I am. Looks like there's a lot of Olympic stuff that's just terribly boring. Yeah, there's nothing happening news-wise. So I think this is really good for the president because looking at the headlines today, the president's 3 tweets are probably the most interesting news today. Right? That's important because they have to focus on what's most interesting. And at this point, the president's 3 or 4 tweets this morning are the biggest news. Yeah, I'm not feeling the Olympics. Let me tell you what I think about the Olympics. You probably know that I'm the person who says that systems are better than goals. A goal is you have a very specific thing you're trying to do, such as win a gold medal in the Olympics. Let's say you're 6 years old and you start working toward your goal of winning a gold medal in the Olympics. Well, one person out of a million might actually be the person who wins that gold, and they're pretty happy and they think, look how smart I was. I knew from the age of 6 that I would win that gold medal, and I got it, and that really helped my life. But all of the other 999,000 people spent their whole life working toward this goal and not achieving it. it was a dumb play. I would say, I'm going to go right out and say it, the Olympics are really, really bad role models. And I realize that's a little controversial, so I'll say it again. The Olympics are really bad role models. Yeah, very much like the lottery is a bad role model. And the reason is that teaching somebody one narrow skill and making them obsess about it to the point of sacrificing their childhood, maybe their health, to do this one stupid thing like curling or gymnastics or whatever, as fun as it might be for us to watch, it's a horrible life decision for most people. Now, the people who win, you might say, well, that's a pretty good deal. You know, they got ready for something all their life. They nailed it. Isn't that great? That's the last thing you should be teaching children. The last thing you want to do is, hey, why don't you dedicate your whole life to optimizing your body for an arbitrary sport developed hundreds of years ago that nobody cares about? You know, it's just bad parenting to put your kid in the Olympics, in my opinion. Now, of course, there are some kids. Some kids, of course, are self-motivated, and maybe that's a little bit of a difference. But those kids should be taught a variety of skills so that when they go forward into the world, they're better equipped. I just can't see these Olympic athletes being well equipped for the world. Their world has to get really small to focus that much energy in this one narrow, random, completely useless skill. You know, imagine putting all that skill into anything else. You know, just something that had some enduring quality to it. So I have to admit, when I watch the Olympics, you know, I think maybe there's just something wrong with me, but if I watch an Olympic event, of which I've watched 0 this year, and I expect to watch 0 this entire Olympics, when I watch one, all I'm thinking is I'm feeling so bad for all the people who dedicated their whole life to this event and they're going to lose. For every one winner, or you know, you could say 3 winners, gold winner, you know, medal winners. For every 3 winners, there is intense sadness from all the people who wasted their life. You know, the moment somebody wins that medal, all the other people say, well, I just wasted my last 15 years of practice. To me, the Olympics are the saddest thing. Now, I don't feel that way so much when I watch, let's say, a team sport like Olympics, not Olympics, like basketball. If I watch the Golden State Warriors play basketball and they lose, sure, everybody in the team, you know, practiced all their life to be on this basketball team, but they also have another game tomorrow, right? You know, losing in a regular league sport doesn't feel the same. That just feels like fun, you know, a fun competition somebody had to lose, because they'll just go back and compete tomorrow. And sure, the Olympic people do have other competitions and they go back and compete, but they're kind of in it for the Olympics. You know, a lot of them are anyway. All right. Yeah, and the professional athletes get more money, that's true. How long would you work on making Dilbert successful before moving on? So I think you're asking how many years would I put into Dilbert before trying a new thing? And I'll give you the systems answer to that. Dilbert was one of dozens and dozens of things I tried, all about, you know, in the same years, to try to find something that was going to take off, and then therefore I could put more energy into it. So I put very little effort into initially getting Dilbert recognized and published. But once it was published, I put tremendous effort into it, because at that point, the risk had been taken out of it. So once you're actually published, it makes sense to put a lot of effort into that, because you've already got a foothold. But I tried lots of things where I'd put, you know, a good effort into it, but during a limited time. I'd say spend a few months on something, it didn't look like it was getting any traction, move to the new thing. So I would not put 20 years into trying to become a cartoonist, with no success. Where did the name Dilbert come from? It was suggested by a coworker back when I worked in a phone company. Did anyone mention yesterday's tweet? I don't know what yesterday's was. Yeah. Kathy Griffin had his speech. I didn't see it. Now, is it my imagination, or is the anti-Trump part of the world getting ready to have a really, really bad year? I just saw, it was another one of the president's tweets this morning, I think, that the generic ballot, so the generic ballot where they say, would you rather vote for a Republican or a Democrat, and they don't name names, they're just seeing how you feel about the parties. So for the first time, Republicans have pulled ahead in the generic ballot. Ahead. That's not supposed to happen. Now, the generic ballot doesn't tell you everything you're supposed to know, and they're still so close that one poll result doesn't tell you much. But there were very few people who were telling you that the Republicans were going to start pulling ahead and that it could be a blowout by Election Day. One of those people was Newt Gingrich. All right, he said it first. In my memory, maybe you can fact check this. Was Newt Gingrich the first person to say that the 2018 election is shaping up to be like a Republican victory? And he gave a reason, which was the tax bill and people seeing, more in their check. Now Newt's argument is that getting a paycheck that's bigger is just the best persuasion. So it kind of doesn't matter what else happens, if your paycheck is bigger, unless there's a nuclear war or something, big paycheck equals let's get more of that. My prediction came after Newt's, and I waited several weeks because I wasn't seeing Newt's point when he first came out with it. But now I think that's certainly a big part of what the story will be. But I would add to that it looks like the anti-Trumpers put almost all of their energy into this collusion thing. And if the collusion thing doesn't work out, and that appears to be where we're heading, looks like it's not going to work out. And in fact, the attention might turn right back around toward the Democrats. We'll see. We'll see how far Mueller goes. But my prediction was that a straight line from here to Election Day, 2018 election, would put Republicans ahead, meaning that everything is heading Republicans' way, and absolutely nothing is going in the direction of the Democrats. So if those of you who read Win Bigly, you'll remember that in my book Win Bigly, I talked about something my mother taught me as a kid, and she had a saying, I don't know where it came from. She said that you can get used to anything if you do it long enough, including hanging. So, even if you get hung, if you do it long enough, you'll get used to it, meaning you'll be dead. But I told people when candidate Trump was running that as outrageous as he is, people get used to anything. It doesn't matter how outrageous something is. We do get used to it. We are humans who are designed to get used to novelty if the novelty keeps repeating, because then it's not novelty anymore. Our brains are tuned to novelty, not to ordinary. So as something transitions from novel to ordinary, we stop caring because it's now ordinary. And I told you that the president's personality, President Trump's personality, would start out being provocative and crazy and everything else, but would eventually seem to us as ordinary. Now, keep in mind that today's tweet, from 3 hours ago, he used the phrase, the President of the United States used the phrase that Russia is laughing their asses off. The President of the United States used ass in a tweet to the country. Speaking publicly to the country, he used the word asses, right? Now, he also used 400-pound hacker, right? Now, here's the thing. The news today will not be about his use of the word asses. That will not be the news. Do you know why that won't be the news? Because we got used to it. So remember, I told you we'd get used to it. And today's news was somebody, I'm not saying that nobody's going to mention it, because of course they will. But it's not a big deal. You know, we're so used to his style of talking now that when the president says, yeah, they're laughing their asses off and there's a 400-pound hacker in the basement, we just say, oh, really? Are they laughing? Yeah, maybe it was a hacker. Like we're completely used to it. Told you it was coming. Yeah, I'm going to count that as another accurate prediction. So it looks like, to me, it looked like the new attack by the anti-Trumpers, and I don't know if it's the new attack or it's just more of what they're doing. But if you notice that sex is the new attack, so they're going after people's personal lives, and of course they should. We're talking about Rob Porter here. Obviously, it is appropriate to go after him if assuming the allegations are true. But I think this is the sort of thing that probably the enemies of the White House are trying hard to do. In other words, they're looking, and I would imagine that all of the people around the president are now being investigated, for opposition research, so that the opposition can get more scalps. They're trying to get Kelly, because if the opposition gets Kelly, I think they think that would be a huge setback for the president, because the Kelly-Trump team has been pretty good, hasn't it? Wouldn't you say Kelly has done a good job as far as we can tell? Now, the exception, of course, is this Rob Porter thing. And we don't know if this will end him or not. But it does look like they work well as a team, and that's a hard team to get to work, right? I mean, think how hard it is. Imagine trying to staff that chief of staff job again. I mean, that's a hard job to staff for this presidency. So I think they're going after the president's marriage. I think that they're going to go after his advisors, and they're going after him with personal stuff. And you should expect that they will go after supporters. I'm surprised they're not after me. It seems like somebody would be after me by now. Although I'm a little bit bulletproof. Trump has no shame in his game. You jinxed it. Check out CNN now. What's on CNN now? Why am I bulletproof? So I'm bulletproof for the same reason that President Trump has so far been bulletproof. I've never presented myself as a role model. And if you found out that I'd done something you don't like, I don't know what it would be. It'd be probably something different for everybody. Let me say as clearly as I can right now, ahead of time, in case anything bad comes out about me. I don't know what it would be, but let me tell you all ahead of time. I guarantee you that if you look at the entire arc of my life, there is something in there that every one of you could hate. Now, it might be different things for different people. Some of you might hate that I said or did one thing. Some of you might hate that I said or did another thing. But in all likelihood, if anybody comes after me, they will come after me the way they have in the past. Now, do you know how people have come after me in the past? Because, I've had The pitchforks and crowds come after me pretty hard in the past. It's always the same. They make something up. So far, all of the attacks on me have been actually made up. They usually take something out of context, twist it a little, and very much like they're doing to the president. So what they did with the president was said, oh, your hoax comment has been debugged. That's just made up. It's completely made up. But if enough people say, we debunked your hoax, Mr. President, then a lot of people on that side will say, well, that must be true. They debunked his hoax, that big old liar. But nothing like that happened. That did not happen. So attacks on me in the past have been identical to that. They make something up, sort of loosely crafted on something I said. Yeah. I don't have much of a celebrity footprint for people to go after. Well, I have a huge body of work on the internet, and anybody who talks and writes as much as I do has plenty of stuff that if people want to turn it into something else, it's easy to do. So before I go, I want to tell you about last night. So Christina and I went to a 3-star Michelin restaurant last night. We decided a few months ago that we were going to try to visit this year some of the top restaurants in the Bay Area, just because we hadn't done it. So neither of us are foodies. Neither Christina or I care too much about food. We like food. But we went to a 3-star Michelin. If you're not familiar with that rating system, 3-star, I believe, is the top. So these would be like the top restaurants in the world, not just locally, but in the world. And I'm not going to name names because other people might like this restaurant, but it was a Michelin 3-star restaurant in San Francisco last night, and it's so popular we couldn't even get in until 9 p.m. So we had reservations, from weeks ago, and even still, we couldn't get until 9 p.m. And I sat there eating this. The French Laundry is amazing. The French Laundry is not the one I'm talking about. I had one of the best eating experiences of all time at the French Laundry. So this was another 3-star restaurant, and three Michelin star. And I sat there thinking, I wish I could be having the canned soup that I eat pretty much every day. Just like soup out of a can, because it's really good. There wasn't one single thing in any of the menu, I think there were 9 courses or something. There wasn't a single bite of anything that was as good as a single scoop of soup from canned soup that I had in the microwave. Not one. And by the way, not even close. Like if I were to rate from 1 to 10, I would say that can of soup was it's a solid 8. It's pretty good, really good. You're wondering the brand, Amy's, A-M-Y, Amy's. They have several soup brands that are really good, or soup types. Now, and I'm going to tell you how much I spent. All right. So if you count the tip for 2 people for dinner without alcohol, so Christina and I didn't drink. I don't drink, and she rarely drinks. So we had no alcohol, ate at a 3-star Michelin restaurant, and spent $1,200. I spent $1,200 and had an eating experience, and this is no exaggeration. I'm not saying this to be funny. There's no hyperbole here at all. And the eating part of the experience was not even close to a can of Amy's soup. Not even close. The restaurant was maybe a 5 out of 10. And that was 9 different courses. There wasn't one course that was really much above a 5. So I think my plan of eating at expensive restaurants is not as genius as I thought it would be. Anyway, so if you get a chance to go to a 3-star restaurant, don't do it. Now, what's interesting is this is the second 3-star Michelin restaurant I've eaten at in the last few months. The last one I didn't pay for the last one. That was a business thing. But the last one wasn't good either. And when I say wasn't good, I don't mean it wasn't a 10 out of 10. It was just a 9. I mean, it was a 5. You know, McDonald's would have tasted a lot better, and that's not a joke. I am not joking. McDonald's French fries would have been far better than anything I ate at any of the Michelin 3-star restaurants, and I don't know why that is. Like, I'm trying not to be the guy who complains too much. I'm being as objective as I can. A can of soup was much tastier than either of the Michelin 3-star restaurants. It feels like, honestly, it feels like this whole high-end Michelin star restaurant thing is just cognitive dissonance. It feels like if they give you enough of a show, and that's part of what they do is, you know, the plates come out and there's lots of tiny little things in the plates, and there's lots going on, and they've paired things that don't usually go together and stuff like that. And because you know you're going to pay a lot, and you dressed up and you went to a nice building and the service is good and the plate looks good, I think people talk themselves into liking it. So, I used to own a couple of restaurants, and I can tell you that the psychology of taste is really a big deal. So some of the biggest things you need to get right in a restaurant to make the food taste good include lighting. If you don't get the lighting, just the general lighting of your restaurant right, the food won't taste as good, because our senses are kind of cross-linked. And the reason the food won't taste as good, and you're not going to like this, if you get the lighting wrong, the person across the table from you, your date, and it's usually your date, doesn't look as good. If you go to dinner and your date doesn't look as good, your food doesn't taste as good. Because our senses, they have a lot of crosstalk. Have you ever tried, I'm sure you've tried this, have you ever been in love and let's say you have amazing sex with the person you're actually in love with? It probably makes a difference if you're in love. And you're just so happy because, you're in love and you just had this great physical experience. And then immediately go to dinner right after that great experience and just pay attention to how the food tastes. It's a completely different experience. If you have a great experience with your loved one and then go to dinner, that food tastes different. Now, some of that may not be psychological as much as, chemical. There's probably just stuff going on after sex. But if you get the lighting, the experience, everything from the parking to the colors used on the walls, the presentation of the food on the plate, the noise, the noise factor, all of those things affect how things taste, because your senses are all have some crosstalk. So my hypothesis is that the Michelin 3-star restaurants get everything right except the taste of the food, and people don't notice. So I'll say that again. I think the top restaurants get everything right except the taste of the food, because it didn't matter. Because you end up saying, well, that's good food. Now, they also usually serve you wine. Now, we didn't have wine with either meal. And that might make a difference. Not might. That makes a big difference. Having wine in that situation, I believe, would have made all of that food taste better. It's synesthesia, not kinesthesia. I know you were looking for the word about senses cross-talking. It's called synesthesia. People drink more tomato juice on a plane. I drink tomato juice on a plane, but it's because tomato juice feels like it doesn't make me have to pee as much. So that's why I do it. 1,200 was with the tip included. Direct overhead light makes people look ghoulish. That is correct. Yeah, when I say you have to get the lighting right in a restaurant, the main thing you want to get right is you don't want the lighting to be all overhead, because it comes down and it shadows your face. You know, your features shadow your face and makes you look like a monster. How much did I tip? 20%. Tip was $200. I didn't tip for the food. I tipped for the service. The service was excellent. I have no complaint with the service. Did Christina have the same opinion? I think as a matter of policy, I'm not going to characterize her opinion of anything. So I think I'll leave it at that. Why did I notice the food? I don't know what you mean. Yeah, it's never a good idea. People are saying I'm smart not to paraphrase the opinion of my girlfriend, Christina. It just never works out. It just never works out. How does your lack of smell affect this? Well, my lack of smell, for those of you who don't know, I lost my sense of smell completely. I have no sense of smell years ago. I don't know why. Probably, I think there might have been some steroid nasal allergy med I used that did it. I'm not positive. But strangely enough, although taste and smell and taste are closely related, I don't have any sensation of losing my smell. Or, I'm sorry, I still have my taste as far as I can tell. But it has not been lost on me that it's possible, no, it wasn't Zycam, it's possible that I'm imagining the taste. It's not impossible that what I think is my taste is actually an imagined taste. It's also not impossible that my ability to taste went from this good to this good, but that it's fine. That's all I needed, and maybe my brain translates it as it's just like it always was. But I can't tell the difference. If you said, does food taste the same now, then I have no sense of smell as it did when I was a child, when I could smell everything. I would say, I remember it the same. It feels the same. Scott keeps ignoring Russian sanctions. So let me see if I understand the comment. The comment is that we are not putting on Russian sanctions, even though did Congress vote for it? So it's the president who's not putting the sanctions on, even though we now have evidence of Russian interference in the election. I think that's the comment. And my comment on that is that we don't know what's going on. And we can't know. And we shouldn't know. It's the thing we shouldn't know. So if you look at Russia and the United States, there's lots of stuff going on. There are a few places we're probably on the same side and we coordinate in some frenemy kind of way. There are places, maybe with cyber stuff and psyops where we're screwing them, they're screwing us. There are military things that we're doing that we don't know about. There are missiles being put in places they don't like. So you've got this big, complicated ball of yarn, which is all the ways that the United States and Russia are working together or against each other. Then you've got this whole world of different interests, like North Korea. We want them to work with us there. Syria, I guess we want them to at least not be too much trouble there. So we have all these interests where Russian coordination is important. And we don't know all the ways that the United States is already screwing Russia in retaliation for their psyops. It's possible, but we don't know and never will, that we don't need the sanctions because we're already doing such bad things to Russia and they know it, that you don't need to do much more. In other words, you don't want to oversell your sanctions. There's some amount that's enough, there's some amount that's not enough, there's some amount that's too much. So when you say, hey, why aren't we putting those sanctions on them? I say to you, we don't know and can't know how much we're already doing to them, because most of it should be secret, from us anyway. It seems to me that if the United States discovered that Russia was interfering in our elections, that the natural counter move would be to interfere with their process in a similar way. In other words, showing them that when they do this to us, they get it back in the same amount. But let me propose, let's say, a hypothesis. And I need somebody to fact check me on this, because I'm not positive my facts are right. But can you fact check me on this? Is it true that Hillary Clinton, when she was in the State Department, at least was, people said, she was behind organizing the protests against Putin? Can you fact check me on that? Is it true that Hillary Clinton tried to interfere with the Russian election? All right. Now, if it's true that Hillary Clinton tried to interfere with the Russian election, then what we saw as the interference by Russia in our election is the sanctions. So you're asking the question backwards. You're saying, why aren't we sanctioning Russia for interfering with our election? Go back a little further, and I would say, no, what you just saw was we interfered with their election, and Russia put sanctions on us. The sanctions were that they interfered with our election, and they let us know it. Because if you're wondering why it is that Russia was so easily detected in all of this, well, there are two possibilities. One, Russia didn't do it. That would be one reason. Somebody else did it to make it look like Russia. But our intelligence services are ruling that out. I'm not sure that's right, but let's go with that for now. The other reason that Russia would interfere with our election in a way that was easy to detect is because those were our sanctions. We interfered with their election, and they paid us back, and there was no point in paying us back unless we knew it was them. So it's entirely possible that the reason we're not sanctioning them for their sanctions is that it never ends. If we sanction them for their sanctions, don't they need to sanction us for the sanctions of their sanctions? It seems to me that, we poked them in the eye with interfering with their election, and they poked us back in exactly the same way. It was one eye. It wasn't even two eyes. It's like we did one eye, poke. And Putin said, hey, I just caught you interfering with my election. Poke. Same poke. So, without knowing all of the things we're already doing with Russia, all the things we need them to do, the ways we're coordinating and not talking about, the ways we're screwing them behind the scenes, but we're not talking about, when you ask, hey, why aren't we putting those sanctions on them? I say that's a good question, and I'd like to know the answer to it as well as you would. But don't assume that one variable, which is sanctions that we haven't put on them, matters. It's true we haven't done it, but it's not true and not obvious to me that it would be the right thing to do, or that we aren't already doing worse things, or that we don't need them to work with us and it's just the wrong time to do it, or we just realize that we poked them first, they poked us, but our government doesn't like to admit we were behind anything. And since we can't admit we poked Russia first, we also can't admit that interfering with our elections was their version of sanctions. Our government can't say that, because to say that Russia is paying us back is to say that they had a reason, and we don't admit that reason. Can you explain what a sanction is? I'm using the word sanction in more of a generic sense. The way it's used typically is in an economic sanctions way, but I'm using it more generically. Can I teach you a hypnosis lesson? Not really on here. Am I a Lee Stranahan groupie? I have not watched his show. So somebody's saying, check CNN. Am I checking CNN on TV or there? Let's see what CNN is saying. I don't see anything. Oh, the carnage Russia doesn't want to talk about. Is that what it is? So there's an article on CNN that says there are growing indications that U.S. airstrikes killed and injured dozens of Russian military contractors in Syria. Moscow appears to wish this story would go away. So Moscow is not complaining about us killing their soldiers, or their not their soldiers, their military contractors. This is CNN. It says the Kremlin has downplayed reports of mass casualties, not naming any of those who died, and not said why they were there in the first place. Oh, so it might be just because they don't want to say why they were there in the first place. So it might not have anything to do with U.S. relations. It could be just a case they don't want to have to admit why they're there. All right. Can someone be hypnotized to dampen their sense of smell? Probably. I've never seen that done, but that seems like something you could do, yes. Yes, I saw the tweet with 100-year-old Wolf Blitzer. That was the president's tweet of a comic. Someone says they love my courage. What courage am I displaying? I didn't know I had any. How did I get into hypnosis? Somebody's asking me how I became a hypnotist. So I wrote about that in my book, Win Bigly, but the quick story is that my mother was hypnotized by my family doctor when she gave birth to my little sister. And she reported that she felt no pain, but was, alert and was, conscious the entire birth, but didn't feel pain. Now that's unusual, and I also don't know if it was true. That's just the family story that my mother told for years. I know the part that is true is that my family doctor was a hypnotist. That part I know to be true. But typically only maybe 1 out of 5 people could have an effect from hypnosis that powerful. So about 2 in 5 people can be hypnotized to not feel pain. So it's entirely possible. And that experience of hearing those stories from my mother made me think this hypnosis stuff must be really powerful. And what I didn't know is that it was more powerful than I ever imagined. It changes your entire worldview. Everything you do after you learn hypnosis looks different. Somebody says I'm the bravest pundit ever. No, I'm just the one who's not working for a paycheck. So, which is a good time to mention this. It seems to me that the value of these periscopes is that I say things, at least in most cases, that you're not going to hear on the regular media. And some of it is because I don't have to answer to anybody. So I don't have any corporate sponsors. Nobody's going to fire me for my job as a pundit on Periscope. So I can say things that they can't say on TV, they can't say in the New York Times. They just can't do it because they can't say stuff that's off-brand or just would be too provocative. So I started a Patreon account, and people are donating, $1 here, $1 there. You can donate as much as or as little as you want, apparently, and that's my incentive. So it's direct public support of this, and it does make a difference. I can tell you that the Patreon account does influence me to do more of these, because I find myself every once in a while saying, I'll just skip it today. And then I think, but a bunch of people donated to that Patreon account. And so I think, even though the money that's being donated, to be honest, is a very small amount, but it does change my behavior. And it has to do with reciprocity. So one of the big concepts in persuasion is that if you do a favor for someone, they're spring-loaded to do a favor back. So people are hardwired to reciprocate any kind of generosity. So every time I check my, I'll do it right now. I don't think I'll show you, but I'll check my Patreon account. And every time it goes up by like one patron, so there are 349 people who have donated as little as $1 and sometimes more. And every time I see there's another person who donated like just $1, just $1, I'll say to myself, "Wow, I'm gonna have to, raise my game, because now I owe this guy $1." It's completely irrational, but the Patreon donations, and by the way, if you wanted to find it, it's Scott Adams Says. Just go to Patreon and search for my name, Scott Adams Says. But it changes my entire view of what I'm doing here. All right. Essentially, it changed from something that I do because I feel like it and I want to. I still feel like it and I still want to. But now it feels like I'm part of something, right? The Patreon stuff, that makes me part of like a group, part of a tribe, people who are supporting this specific brand of commentary, I guess. The value for value model. Yes, that's what it is. Yeah, that does make sense. It is, people are paying directly for the value as opposed to advertisers getting in the middle. How did the Bill Mitchell show go? Well, I thought it went great. I tweeted a link to it, or you can search for Bill Mitchell, you can find him. Do you know Adam Curry? I know him through Twitter. I've communicated with him a few times. Do you do ironing also? I do. It's funny. Last night I was going to iron my shirt. I didn't have enough time. When will I do Periscope interviews? Well, I just need people to be in the same place, and I need to get my ass in gear about that. No, I don't iron my t-shirts, but don't have any news on Black Lives Matter. By the way, I'm wondering how much the news... So you saw the news that the Russian trolls were organizing both protests and counter-protests at the same time. So most of you saw those stories that in at least one city, and I think maybe it was only one city, fact check me on this, was it just one city where the Russians organized a protest and the counter-protest at the same time in the same place? I think Charlottesville, but people are saying Houston and New York City. 2 cities maybe? So it was either 2 or 3. And here's the question. if you were a person who attended those types of things, even if you hadn't attended one of the ones that were in the news about the Russian organizing it, even if you didn't attend that one, would you attend one in the future now that you know that some of them are fake? Think about it. What are the odds if you were one of the Antifa or one of the Black Lives Matter people who came out because some organizer had said, let's go out and do this thing, would you go out to another one for an organizer you didn't recognize? Wouldn't, if you just saw like a Facebook page that says, hey, everybody meet in this city at this time, we're going to protest the president, would you go? Now, I'm not sure that the news that these are fake protests or fake organizers of protests, I don't know if the news has reached everybody. But to the extent that that news has reached people, I don't think people are going to go out for it. Because imagine how embarrassed you'd be now that you know it's true. Imagine how embarrassed you'd be if you went to one of these protests that Russia organized, now that you know Russia organizes fake protests, right? If you did it before, it's a little bit embarrassing. And most people can say, well, I didn't go to one of theirs, I went to one of ours, and that was legitimate. But now that you know they're doing it, and you know they're not going to stop, or at least, now that Russia, let me put it another way. Now that Russia has taught us how fun it is to create fake protests, don't you think American trolls are going to be doing this like crazy? Do you think there's any chance that American trolls, and trolls from other countries just for fun, do you think there's any chance they're not going to be organizing their own fake protests all over next election? You know it's going to happen, right? We already do. So I've got a feeling that the news about the Russians organizing those protests is going to make the whole idea of protesting President Trump feel a little bit mockable. Well, going back to my first comment, those of you who were crazy enough to be here for the entire time, the first thing I started was that by the Russia collusion thing has now become a punchline. I suppose it could change if some new news comes out, but at the moment it's more of a punchline than a story. The protests are also sort of a Russian punchline. Today, if you saw a protest and a counter-protest in the same place, wouldn't you ask yourself if those are real? And wouldn't you be laughing about the Russian protests? So from now on, anytime you see a protest, you're going to ask yourself, hey, there's another Russian protest. It looks like Putin fooled another group. Now, it might not be true, but people are going to say it. So protesting went from a cool thing where you could dress up and, take your pepper spray and put on your little mask and you'd all be dressed black and you're all cool and you're going out there. Not only are you cool, you're cooler than anybody. You're so cool, you're protesting. But now, protesting looks a little bit like you got fooled by Putin. It looks like Putin played you, even if he didn't. So people are going to have that in their heads, and they're going to say, maybe I'll skip this protest. I don't want to be mocked. I've often wondered if Charlottesville was organized legitimately or illegitimately. Let me ask you, do you think the Charlottesville, I'm talking not about the protests, I'm talking about the original Tiki Torch stuff. So the original Antifa Tiki Torch dust up, with the tragic death that happened in Charlottesville originally, how many of you think that was organic? Nothing about that looked organic to me. And I'm going to say that from the very first, it looked fake. To me, it looked fake. So somebody's saying the Tiki torches are real. Well, the torches were real, but who was behind the organizing? So Richard Spencer. Who's behind Richard Spencer? So here's the question I asked you. Do you think Richard Spencer is working for this country or Russia? Does Richard Spencer work for the United States? Not working for the United States, obviously, but do you think he's operating on his own, or do you think he's operating with a little help from Russia? It's funny that we don't know. You know, if you'd asked me a year ago, I'd say, well, he's just working on his own. But now you don't know. Now you don't know. All right. I'm going to sign off now. I think we've done enough.